Glenn Fogel 20年前加入 Booking Holdings 集团，他带领这家公司相继完成了对 Booking.com、Agoda、Rental Cars、Kayak、OpenTable 等公司的收购，并逐步成长为全球市值最高的旅游集团。在过去的20年间，他也亲历了911和2008年金融危机对旅游业带来的致命打击。作为 Booking Holdings 集团的 CEO， Glenn Fogel 将如何带领这艘巨舰直面新冠疫情带来的重大挑战，继续乘风破浪？在 Glenn Fogel 的眼中，未来的旅游是什么样子？让我们一起欢迎 Booking Holdings 集团 CEO Glenn Fogel。
So, hello Glenn, it's great to have you speak on TravelDaily conference again, though you have to do this online this year. So welcome back. Could you please say hi to our Chinese audience? Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to. Hello, everyone. And I am so sorry that I am not there in person. And I'm so sorry that we are doing this virtually instead of being together, because I haven't seen Charlie in a long time in person. I'd like to do that. It's been a long time.
Okay, so let's start. So over the past 11 months, the COVID-19 pandemic has seen the sector as well as the world greatly impacted. The latest figure from WTTC reveals that despite a slight improvement since June, a staggering 174 million travel tourism jobs could be lost in year 2020 if barriers to global travel remain in place. Prolonged travel restriction could also animate 4.7 trillion US dollars in the sector's contribution to the global GDP, equating to a loss of 53% compared to 2019. So as for your company, according to the latest financial data for Q3, travel bookings decreased 47% and room nights booked decreased 43% over a year ago. So my question is, as we know you have taken many actions to navigate through the challenging time, including raising about $4 billion US dollars debts and the recent restructuring. Have these measures helped?
Well, yes, it's a very good question. And it's been hard for everybody in the travel industry. We all know how terrible the pandemic has impacted so many people's lives around the world, in some places much worse than others. And I just want to start off by my compliments to everybody in China who did such a wonderful job of containing the virus and being able to get back to a more normal life relatively quickly. And that's really something to compliment the actions taken there that have really been very well known throughout the world as a way to try and beat this virus. Unfortunately, other parts of the world, it's not been as easy. And we have definitely suffered from it. Our company, as you mentioned those numbers, Charlie, we have absolutely been hurt. But by taking a lot of measures at the very beginning, saving money, cutting costs, raising new money, and doing all the things that can help make sure that we can get through this terrible crisis with our best foot forward, really thinking for the future, it's going okay.
So as we know, actually, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused significant impact to many people's life and work. We also know, actually, you were also infected with COVID-19 in this March, and really good to see, actually, you are recovering very quickly. Could you please tell more about this experience?
Sure. Yes, I became ill relatively early in this crisis in March. And it was the virus in the United States was centered in the New York City area. That was where the worst part of the pandemic was. And I live in the New York City area. And my wife became ill first. She wasn't that ill, but a little bit. And then very quickly, I became ill, and my son and my daughter. Now, I had a small fever, not much, and a little bit of a headache, not so bad. And it was over very, very quickly for me and our family. But the first thing I have to do is I have to tell everybody about how wonderful the CEO of C-Trip, trip.com, Jane's son. Jane spoke to me when I was ill, and she said, Glenn, anything, how can I help you? What do you need? If there's, Chinese medicine, I can get it to you. If you need and it was so wonderful. I mean, that is a true friend. And for me to thank her and James Lamb, everybody there.
So the latest financial data of Booking Holdings shows that Booking.com's alternative accommodations represented roughly 1/3 of all new bookings in Q3. So how do you anticipate this future trend? Does that mean the major shift towards alternative accommodation over traditional hotels when travelers make that travel purchase?
It was interesting when the pandemic first started, and I wasn't certain, would people say, I'm only going to stay in a hotel because I think it may be safer because they'll do industrial strength cleaning and disinfecting. They'll do it professionally. They'll make sure everything is clean and safe. Or would people say, I don't want to be in a hotel because I'm concerned there'll be a lot of people there. There'll be people in elevators. There'll be people in the lobby. And I'm going to get an alternative accommodation, a home far from the city where no one else is there. And I'll be safe that way. And I wondered which way it was going to go. Well, we now know from the data. We know that a lot of people decided they wanted to stay in an alternative accommodation, a home, to be safer. And we saw that in the numbers. Now, here's the interesting thing, though. In the second quarter, the share of people who wanted a home instead of a hotel was much higher than it was a year earlier. Mm-hmm. But in the third quarter, that difference got smaller, showing that people were feeling safer or they just weren't as concerned and were willing to spend more time in hotels. So it'll be interesting in the future when things are all back to normal. Is the share between alternative accommodations and hotels go back to the way it was before the pandemic? Or now that people have tried out a home and said, hey, I like staying in a home, now will they consider a home when they're thinking about where to stay in their next holiday? And I think they will. So I think what has happened is the pandemic brought forward a trend that was happening anyway, which is more and more people were interested in alternative accommodations. And I think that's a sign that it's becoming a much more mature business, the alternative accommodation business.
Okay, so many governments around the world are supposed to tighten and clarify regulations for short-term rental of residential property. So the pressure from hotels and local residents on the government after COVID-19 may also accelerate this change. So do you think this will change the fundamentals of shared accommodation? So what impact it might have on your business?
So it's interesting when you think about it, there are a lot of issues regarding short-term rentals. And we always want to consider all the people involved in the business. So it's not just us and the people who own the short-term rental property. And it's not just the traveler who may want to go to it. We always have to think about the other people too, the people who live in the community, the governments. And we also have to think about things like sustainability.
Talking about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on travel, many travel executives forecast a permanent reduction in business travel due to COVID-19 of around 15%. So the implosive growth of video conferencing also makes some business travel unnecessary. So what's your take on this? How this trend will impact the global travel business?
Well, I think we've all learned how we can do work without actually having to be next to each other. We're doing this right now. We're doing this through the magic of telecommunications and this video conferencing, and it's wonderful. Is it as good as being together? No. Is it effective? Yeah, it's pretty effective. But I certainly say if I have a meeting with somebody, and let's say I'm in Bangkok, in our headquarters at Agoda in Bangkok, and I want to have a meeting with somebody in Shanghai. Well, that's not a quick flight, that's a long enough flight. And the idea that I'm going to go fly over from Bangkok to Shanghai, have the meeting, nice, and then get on the plane and come back to Bangkok, that's a lot of time, a lot of money. And I think in the future, there are not going to be a lot of trips like that. Yes, we'll take trips to this conference because in a conference like this, you'll get to meet lots and lots of people at once. So it's worth the time, the money to do that. But the one-on-one trips, I don't think are going to happen as much.
So let's move on. Talking about the Connect trip, a vision you have been promoting for a couple of years, especially after you take the role as the CEO of Booking.com, which is the biggest brand of booking holdings. We know Booking.com recently launched the flight booking service in US. So what's the difference between Connect Trip, one-stop shopping, or dynamic packaging, which many OTAs have been doing for years? So what progress you have made on Connect Trip? Could you please share more color on this?
Well, I totally agree with what you're saying. People have been doing, cross-selling and packaging for a very, very long time. That's true. But the other thing that's been going on for a very long time is people are still very frustrated when they try and set up their travel. It takes a lot of effort. It's a lot of work. It's going to a lot of different sites. And then when you're doing it, God forbid anything goes wrong, you end up talking to lots of different people to try and get things fixed. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there's one place that knows you so well that it offers you up all the things you wanted to do that you have always wanted, and it gives it to you based on what you've done in the past, really knows you well, knows everything about you and your family. And it chooses the things that fit exactly what your budget is. So you're spending the right amount of money. And it's able to make it cheaper by talking with the suppliers in ways to give them opportunities to merchandise their offerings in a way that it doesn't cannibalize their public prices, but puts it into a package type product that makes it cheaper. In addition, once the people have actually bought this and are now doing it, are going out and stuff, if something goes wrong, there's one thing, one number, one email, one text, one WeChat, one way to find out there's something wrong. But even more important in the connected trip is hopefully using all the AI, all the artificial intelligence, all the sensors that we use, we'll be able to know there's going to be a problem before the problem happens and make the changes before the person even knows that problems are happening and be able to fix it for them. It's bringing together all the things that we've been doing in one little place or another little place and tying it together with a payment platform that's very seamless and bring together all the artificial intelligence of what we know about all the elements of travel to make it easier, frictionless, seamless. And we're not the only ones doing it, of course. Obviously, Trip.com is doing this very well and building that out. And Expedia wants to do that. And of course, Airbnb used to talk about doing that. They don't talk about that as much now, but they used to be talking about that. But this is not just our idea alone. This is something that everybody knows. Travel is still a frustrating thing for a lot of people. So the connected trip, that's our vision of making it easier for anybody.
So does that mean the big restructuring of your current business? Because right now you are operating several separate brands.
Well, the lead brand for us is Booking.com, and that's where we're really concentrated the connected trip. But of course, we always want all of our brands to work together, and we are making sure they work together. And I'll give you an example. We have our flights product is primarily right now comes out of our Priceline.com company. They're the company, the brand that really has the expertise in flights. Booking.com has just started to do flights, but we're doing it in a way to make sure we're using all the knowledge and the back-end infrastructure of Priceline.com. And therefore, we're not rebuilding stuff that we already have. That'd be very foolish. We want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can be efficient and not reinvent the wheel, as the saying goes.
Okay. So in the latest conference call, you said your business result is driven by increased virus infections, and certain governments reimposing public health-related restrictions, travel also will continue to be greatly affected by infection trends and the government's public health response. So when do you think the travel market will return to the pre-COVID-19 volumes?
Well, I've been saying for a long time that the recovery is not going to happen to us for quarters, that it will take years to have a recovery back to 2009. All these vaccines are coming out, and people have said, well, does that change my thinking about how fast there'll be a recovery? And I've been very clear that I don't think it changes things. Our understanding of how our recovery is going to come about was based on the hope there would be announcements right about now that there would be vaccines that would hopefully be made effective and approved and could be done throughout the world and soon. But we know it's going to take time. It's going to take time for everybody to get a vaccine, to get the inoculation, the vaccination.
So you have talked about China. So we know actually China has been such important market for all travel companies around the world, and even more important after the COVID-19 pandemic, given China's domestic travel market has rebounded very quickly. Besides the investment in Trip.com, we know actually Booking Holdings also invested in Didi and Meituan. So how this partnership have been going on? How your strategy of Connect Trip could benefit from this partnership in China or maybe even outside of China?
Yeah, so they're going fine. Of course, we've all had to take a step back and concentrate on our core business and what we need to do internally and things in our home markets and do that. But we do know how incredibly important the China market is for travel. Over the next several decades, we all know that the growth in travel will come from China. More and more Chinese tourists will want to explore the world. More and more people are going to want to go to China. It's going to be a locomotive for the travel train, as I like to say. So it's important now that we are beginning to come out of the pandemic. We will then start doing more things with our partners, the people we've invested in. And by the way, we have partnerships. I don't want to go through every single one, but we don't always have to make an investment to have a good partnership and do things together.
Okay, sounds good. So my next question is that, so who would be your biggest competitor in the future, you think? Could you please name one from the following companies? So Google, Amazon, Facebook, Trip.com, and also Airbnb, who just submitted their IPO application actually recently. So which of the you think the biggest competitor?
So every one of the companies you mentioned are great companies. They're all very good. And you have two that are already in travel, very heavily in travel, actually taking customers, dealing with customer service, really in the guts of travel. Of course, Trip.com and Airbnb. But you know who may be the biggest competitor of all? That's a company that hasn't been invented yet. The wonderful thing right now is that everything is happening so fast. Tomorrow, there could be a new company, a couple of young people somewhere around the world, and who knows where, coming up with some new ideas, using some new technology, and in a very short time, because there's so much capital, getting that capital and starting a new travel company that we all look at and say, oh, look at that. And maybe that'll be the biggest one. We don't know yet. But I do know that this competition is going to go on for a very long time.
Okay. So you joined the company in year 2000 and have been with the company for more than 20 years. It's a long time, actually. So over these years, you have gone through the couple of crises, such as the internet bubble in year 2000, September 11, 2008 financial crisis, and also this year's COVID-19. So what you have learned from dealing with this crisis, and what can make the business even stronger than before?
So one of the things that I certainly learned from that, and this one I think is it's an interesting difference between different cultures and different things in the world. Sometimes in the US, people have a very short-term view of the world, and that can be very unfortunate. And also can go to extremes. So during 9/11, the panic, well, start with the internet bubble. When the internet bubble burst, everybody said, oh my Lord, all this stuff is gone. Never going to see this kind of technology things again. It's all over. But it came back. Then when 9/11, the terrorist attacks happened in New York, and I was living in New York at the time, and everybody was so, the world's ending. This is horrible. This is terrible. The world's ending. But of course, the world didn't end. And people said things like, I will never get on an airplane again. I am too scared of this, the terrorism. I will never get on a plane. 6 months after people were saying that, they were getting back on planes. And the same thing with the financial crisis in 2008. Everybody thought, oh, again, the world is ending. It's going to be a Great Depression like the 1930s, and it's all horrible. And each time people say the world is ending, it's terrible and all that. And what I've learned is the world doesn't end. You have to think about the long term. What I learned is don't ever think that what's happening right now is the only way it's going to be. The world will keep spinning. Things will get better.
Okay. Thank you very much. We hope that everything will be getting back to the regular way very soon. Okay, so thank you very much. Do you have anything else so you want to share with our audience?
Well, I just want to say thank you again. Thank you for inviting me. I'm always very, very happy to be able to participate. I really wish we could have participated together in person, but I really am looking forward to when it's safe and we can all get together again. And I think everybody's hoping that for everybody. So please, everybody, let's all just stay safe and look forward to the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking forward to welcome you on our future events. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.